Okay, I think we're just going to make a start at this time. And I wanted to kind of provide a live online session, even though our semester ends on Wednesday, which is just 2 days away. And we typically have been meeting on Wednesdays and Fridays. So just to make sure that everyone has a chance to get kind of the information from the live online session, we're having one today. I think it's going to be helpful for those who want kind of a nutshell version of the learning material and maybe a little bit of advice on some of the questions that have been lingering amongst the students. So this week we're covering special senses, which is our final chapter, I believe chapter number 16. And in addition to that, you'll be completing your final set of exams, so exam 3 and practical 3. So like always, I do have a plan for our weekly meeting. We'll kind of outline the end of the semester, what's the expectations regarding to that, especially when it comes to the due dates. We'll have a look of the homework, discuss a little bit about what's the expectation for full marks on discussion forums. And as always, I want to give you an idea of what to expect on the exam and practical. And let me just mark the newest attendees. So that's the plan that we have for this session. But as always, if you do have any questions, if you want to jump in at any stage, you are more than welcome to do so. But we are on our final week of the semester. This is a little bit of a shorter of a week than our typical weeks. We're wrapping everything up by Wednesday. So for that reason, like I said, I wanted to make sure that we are kind of having an earlier live online session. And as always, this session will be made available as a recording for anyone who can't join us. So well done, first of all. Completing these 200 level classes on an accelerated format in 8 weeks is quite an accomplishment. So remember, if you're writing resumes, if you're writing job applications, having completed a course like that is a great chance for you to boast about how you are experienced of navigating your time, managing your time, navigating high workload, and doing it all with high standard of work. So I think that boasting about your successes is more than well entitled, having completed a summer semester. Having said that, like I said, we're wrapping up the semester a little bit earlier than we would wrap up our typical week. So all of the assignments, including this week's homework, are due by the end of the day on Wednesday. So 1 minute before midnight on Wednesday, I'm looking for all of the work to be submitted. This is so that on Thursday, I can go first thing on Thursday morning, finalize your grades and get them ready for our registry, which wants them submitted on Thursday. So that's why we have that due date. If you have any assignments that you have missed or want to kind of bring up your grade, or if you have anything in terms of, let's say, that you want to submit extra credit work, all that is fair game. Just make sure that you get those to me by the end of the day on Wednesday this week. So this week's assignment, I do have to add to this slide. I've kind of had an overlook there. So this week, we're of course doing also a discussion for both exams and the chapter 16. So let me just add that. And then the other discussion. Let's get those updated. So I believe that that screen should be a little bit more accurate what you're seeing now in terms of we have chapter 16 quiz, chapter 16 discussion, and then the exam tree, practical tree, and then a discussion on those tests. All of those are due on Wednesday, the July 16th. So get those done, get those submitted so you get those points that you so well deserve. Regarding the discussions for chapter 16 discussion, the expectation is like last week, if someone didn't get full marks for discussion, it is because one of these elements was missing. So chapter 16, I'm looking for 2 posts. One of these should be a response to your peer. And you should also include at least one, if not more, questions for your peer to answer to. So it's really kind of this discussion that's driven rather than me giving you discussion prompts like we saw earlier on in the semester. This time it is the students giving discussion prompts for other students. So you can see that there's been an idea of the discussions kind of evolving, growing in level of expectation for students as we move through the semester. So make sure that you cover all of those points for the discussion on chapter 16. For tests 3 discussion, so exam 3 and practical 3 discussion, you only need to post 1 post, and that can be content of your choosing. So let's have a look what you can anticipate in exam 3. Exam 3 covers basically the last of our big set of topics. So we're looking at nervous system. So chapters 12, 14, 13, and 15. I haven't included special senses questions to this exam, but we have all other aspects of the nervous system. There's going to be 22 questions. Again, reviewing the quizzes is going to be helpful. I've been monitoring quite closely of the comments that have already come in on the discussion forum, and the theme seems to be the same as in previous weeks, that just please make sure that you prepare yourself for the exam by completing the chapter quizzes. You will have 1 hour to answer those questions. Most of them are very straightforward. Some of them are a little bit more nuanced. There's 100 points up for grab. You have to take the test on one go. Once you start it, the timer starts and you should finish it. It is a non-proctored one, so if you need to double check any of the questions, you can do so. As before, I don't think there's enough time for you to check every single one of the questions, but there is enough that you can double check if there's any particular question that you're uncertain about. So that was our exam 3. And again, remember, exam 3 is also going to be due on Wednesday by the end of the day. Practical follows very much the similar format. So we're covering the same chapters, chapters 12, 14, 13, and 15. There's 15 questions, mainly from the practice anatomy activities. So it's worthwhile to check those. Let me just update that. And you have 30 minutes to answer to those questions. It's worth of 50 points. So again, once you start the test, you should try to finish it on the same goal. You have an option to look at notes if you need, but again, I don't think there's enough time to look up every single question, but if there's one that's tougher, you certainly can do so. Remember, get these as well submitted by the end of the day on Wednesday. So that's all that I was planning to say about the assignments, that I was planning to say what needs to be submitted. If there's any questions, feel free to just jump in, drop to the chat, or unmute. Otherwise, what I was next going to do was kind of summarize the key points from our final chapter that we've been looking at. And I'm not quite sure if I have the chapter number quite correctly on this slide, so ignore that, but it's still going to cover the same material. So we have been looking at the special senses. Earlier on the semester, when we talked about the skin, we talked a little bit about the touch. But now we're focusing on special sensory organs. So we're looking at senses like vision, taste, smell, hearing, and equilibrium. All of these kind of show us that we rely heavily on our senses, and different animals rely slightly differently on different senses. Humans are highly visual. I think snakes have a different kind of a vision. They're looking more of the world in terms of the vision, in terms of thermal or temperature view. Sheep rely greatly on smell, as you might have seen if you looked at recording of a sheep brain dissection, how the olfactory nerves were very prominent. So special sensors are receptors or organs that are very large and complex structures, and we find those receptors in those localized clusters. And we're going to start our discussion by looking at vision. So again, like I said, humans rely heavily on our vision. In fact, 70% of all sensory receptors that we find in the human are in the eye, and each eye has over 1 million nerve fibers carrying information to the brain. We will not cover on this session all parts, but I did want to highlight some, and I really wanted to focus on the physiology because studying that anatomy is fairly straightforward independently, but I think that physiology is very worthwhile to discuss a little bit more. So eye is one of the easiest ways for poisons and pathogens to get into your body, so we need to have an alternative way to protect this route of entry. Many poisonings are, in fact, due to the poisons having gotten into the body through eye. And the protective mechanism against poisons and pathogens is our tears. Tears help us to clean the surface of the eye, protect it, for example, against those pathogens that I mentioned, also moisten it, so to prevent drying out. Dry eyes are a clinical issue, as many of you know, and lubricate those also so that they function. Tears contain materials to protect and clean eyes, including things like antibodies, so for our immune system comes up again, lysosomes, which are enzymes that help to destroy bacteria, and so on. It's also worthwhile to notice, and I saw this coming up on the discussion forum, so good job for anyone who already discussed this. So there's 6 extrinsic eye muscles. They attach to the outer surfaces of the eye and produce the gross eye movements. Remember that 4 out of 12 cranial nerves are dedicated for vision, and 3 of those are dedicated for the eye movements. So this is why we can use tests that kind of focus on the eye movements, like you see in DUI settings, for example, following the tip of a pen or a light, to see if there's an impairment in the brain activity, because that would give us information about the 3 of the 12 cranial nerves and how well they're functioning, whether the individual is able to control their eye movements. What we see here is multiple important structures of the eyeball and beyond. Again, like I said, I typically don't spend huge amount of time on this. It's fairly straightforward for students to study independently. I did want to highlight from here the structure of the retina, where the light lands on. And again, like I said, I encourage you to study these structures independently. But we're going to kind of unbundle that retina a little bit further. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is that in order for us, is the physiology side. So in order for us to form a sharp, so in focus image or picture on the photoreceptors on the retina, light must be bent. And there's multiple structures that contribute to this. Noteworthy, I would highlight that eyes are optimally adapted for seeing things like seeing things in distance. So this means over 20 feet away. And just let me make a note. So now that we have looked at the eyes and how they're optimally adapted for that distance vision, let's have a look at another situation. So when we're looking at objects that are closer to us, so this is less than 20 feet away from us, the shape of the lens through which the light passes must change in shape. So this is what's known as accommodation. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about how the image lands on the retina, so to speak. So what we see is that the actual image that you look at looks different from the image that you see on landing on the retina. On the retina, that image that lands is reversed from left to right. It's also located upside down, and obviously it's smaller than the object. All of these are important and they facilitate fitting that whole view onto the retina. I also have another slide that I kind of wanted to mention in terms of that it is the retina that converts the light into nerve impulses. And let's study how they pass through a series of structures, eventually resulting in interpretation of what we see. So first of all, that we're going to see, and again, let me take my pointer. We have the optic nerve that passes onwards from the eye. And notice that optic nerve is technically an outgrowth of the brain that extends all the way to the eye. And then we have this optic nerve crossing over at the site known as optic chiasma. And this is partially the explanation why part of the field of view gets flipped to the other side of the brain while the other part does not. Then these messages pass further along the optic tract, and we'll see again a structure known as thalamus. Remember, this was important for processing and choosing what information is passed onwards, coordinating experiences. So again, there's so much stimulus coming into the nervous system that we need to do some choosing. And finally, the information reaches the occipital lobe of the brain, where we give meaning to what we're seeing, just kind of converting those nerve impulses to something useful that we can recognize, that we can give meaning to. The next thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is about the fact that in humans, each eye sees a slightly different view, and there's also overlap between the both eyes. And this is what allows us to have depth vision. So this is really our brain interpreting and combining these slightly different views, which allows us to form this three-dimensional interpretation of the world, which is really crucial for a lot of things that we do, for example, like driving. So that's what I wanted to say about the visual system. I also wanted to mention a little bit about ear. So there's two senses that are actually housed here. First, we'll see that hearing is housed within the ear, and also equilibrium, which refers to your balance, is housed within these structures. We will see different organs for these senses, and the receptor type that we see present here is mechanoreceptor. So this responds to mechanical stimulus. So basically we're converting, for example, sound waves and vibration into nerve impulses. So if we look at an individual ear, we can divide ear into three areas. So we have our outer or external ear, we have our middle ear, and finally we have our inner or internal ear. You'll be able to read on each of one of these in more detail if you're interested. We will discuss the most important parts of the middle ear today. So I want us to focus really on three bones of the inner ear, and these are incredibly small bones if you look at them. So these are going to be our hammer, anvil, and stirrup, each named kind of a little bit of based on the shape that people have associated with these. The role of theirs is to convert the sound waves, which are essentially more or less condensed air waves, and make them into movements to the fluids of the inner ear. And it is there where these can be then converted into nerve impulses that pass to the brain. So pretty impressive set of mechanisms converting the condensed and less condensed air into actual nerve impulses that we then analyze and have our sense of hearing as a result of that. Here we see pathway of vibrations from sound waves in the air to nerve impulses. Eventually, what we see is that the perception level takes level at the brain as those nerve impulses are then kind of processed further. But what we see really is that we're seeing the movement by the ossicles from the eardrum to the oval window, and sound is then amplified by the ossicles. And these pressure waves cause vibrations in the basilar membrane, in the spiral organ of the corti, and hair cells of these membranes are then bent when the basilar membrane vibrates against it. And as a result, an action potential starts in the cochlear nerve. So this was our cranial nerve 8, I believe. And the impulse travels then to the temporal lobe. I also want to talk a little bit about the sense of balance, as it is so important for us. So vestibular apparatus is a sensory system in the inner ear that helps you to maintain your balance and sense of spatial orientation. Vestibular apparatus includes 5 vestibular organs, including 3 semicircular canals. And these canals really provide us kind of the 3 axes of the coordinates so we can sense things on every direction. What this vestibular apparatus does, it helps you to detect your head's position and movement, which again helps you to coordinate your eye movements, your posture, and your equilibrium. It also sends nerve signals to the brain, which then helps you to make compensatory movements in response to that. So we see that we're constantly adjusting and responding. And like I mentioned, the hair responds to these changes. So let's look at that. I have a nice diagram here. So we see an example of the static equilibrium receptors. As we change the angle of the head, those hair then are stimulated and trigger nerve impulses to be fired. I also wanted to briefly mention chemical senses. So these are going to be our taste and smell. They go together, both are stimulated by chemicals in solution. Both of these senses also complement each other and respond to many similar stimuli. So we will look at the smell first. We can differentiate a wider range of chemicals there, and then we'll look at the taste, and there's really 5 types of receptors that we'll see at this level. So taste buds house the receptor organs for the taste. They are located mainly in the tongue, but also on the soft palate, superior part of the pharynx, and at the cheeks. Taste buds are frequently replaced by basal cells, so there's a constant turnaround, so we're able to keep them well functioning. And then if we think about the impulses from these taste buds, they are carried to the gustatory complex by several cranial nerves because taste buds are found in so many different areas. So we see contribution from your facial nerve, so cranial nerve 7, your glossopharyngeal nerve, which is the cranial nerve 9, and your vagus nerve, which was the cranial nerve 10. Let's come back to this slide. And I wanted to mention about 5 basic taste sensations. So we have sweet receptors that respond to things like sugars and saccharins and some amino acids. Then we have sour receptors that really respond to hydrogen ions and acids. We have bitter receptors that respond to alkaloids, salty receptors that respond to metal ions, and finally, umami receptors that respond to amino acid glutamate or the beefy taste of the meat. So in some restaurants, you might see that they capitalize on the umami to give that really pleasant kind of a full meaty flavor. And that really brings us to the end of kind of reviewing the material on this chapter's content. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about what to expect as the semester wraps up on Wednesday. So all the assignments are due on Wednesday. I will finalize the grades during Thursday. And once the grades have been finalized, you will be receiving an announcement from me that tells you to check your grade book and let me know if there's any questions that you have. And then I'll be submitting your grades to the registry on Thursday. So what does this mean to me? Or mean to us? What it means is that it's more than important that you make sure that any work that you want to count towards your final grade is submitted by the end of the day on Wednesday. Remember that this week you have been asked to do homework on chapter 16. So there's a quiz. The big thing that I want you to focus on is the discussion forums. Remember, on discussion forums, the expectation is 2 posts. One of them should be in response to your peers. And finally, get full marks, one of your posts should also include at least 1, if not more, questions for your peers. So those questions are what serve as the kind of input for your peers' second set of posts. So this is more student driven. You'll see that path that I started initially by kind of driving much of the discussion forums, but now further along the course we have gone, it's more and more student driven. Remember also to complete your third exam and third practical. Both of those were due by Wednesday, end of the day. And once I have finalized your grades, you will each one receive an individualized message from me. On that message, I will outline the next steps. I will also share details if you are hoping to take further classes with me, how to make that happen in terms of communicating with my boss. I will also share details if you ever need references, how to get hold of me, how that process works, and so on and so on. And that really brings us to the very end of everything that I had planned for today. I realized that normally we have been meeting on Wednesdays and Fridays, but since, like I said, this course, all the work is due by Wednesday, I wanted to make sure that I still have a chance to meet with you, whether it is thank you for those who attended today, you will definitely get extra credit for that, or whether it is the people who choose to watch a recording or otherwise get up to date what's needed for completing this week's assignments. And that really wraps up with our semester in terms of these optional live online sessions. It certainly has been my pleasure working with each and every one of you. Like I said at the very beginning of this session, the fact that you've done such a great job on this accelerated course is something that you can definitely boast on your resumes, on your job applications, really demonstrating your great time management skills, your great self-directedness, great ability to stay on top of a vast amount of work in terms of the workload. Like I said, even if I don't get to see you again, I am still here to help you. I'm here to help you this semester and beyond this semester. So if you ever need any assistance, may it be A&P, may it be microbiology, may it be for references, may it be for something else, don't hesitate to contact me. I am here to help. One of the things that I most enjoy in my job is really seeing my students and all the amazing things that they go on to do. So don't hesitate. If I have bandwidth, if I have ability, I will always be here to assist you in anything that I can think of to help with. And I think that that's everything that I had planned for this session. If anyone has any questions, you are more than welcome to unmute yourself and share those or drop them to the chat. But really, I think that that's all that I have for you for today or for this week. Like I said, I know that it has been an intense semester. I know that kind of changing this last week structure is a little bit of an inconvenience. It is because the college wants me to have your grades ready on Thursday morning. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we still have a live online session. Thank you again. I appreciate you. You are welcome to just go ahead and live your life. I'll make sure that I give you extra credit for being here. Or if there's anything that I can help, just unmute yourself or jump to the chat. I'll stick around for a while. But I think that at this point, I'm going to stop the recording. And later on today, I'll upload the recording also onto the Canvas. Thank you again.